I'm Judy from Chadwick Martin Bailey. It's my 4th year at the conference, and I love this conference because of all of the amazing ideas that are presented by thought leaders from academia and from corporate America. At some point, though, usually about 11 o'clock or so, my head feels like it's going to explode because there's just so many great ideas. And I think what's important as we move to this the last 3 sessions then is kind of focusing in on a couple of high-impact ideas that you can take home. This first speech is going to be about storytelling, and storytelling that has to happen very quickly because Instagram stories last just a few seconds then before they disappear. But it's important to think about what a good story means, that there's some premise, that there's some protagonist, there's some story arc, maybe some antagonist, some conflict. There's a lot that needs to be communicated. You have just a short period to do it, but you as marketers need to think about the right places for telling those stories. Eric's going to share some information about why Instagram Stories is a good place for you to share those stories. So Eric is Global Head of Business Marketing, working with businesses to develop and execute programs that help them thrive on Instagram. He's been there for about a year. He had spoken here 2 years ago for Spotify. I remember him speaking there. He has his PhD in psychology, and he's going to talk about tapping into Instagram's cultural focus and the rapid adoption of Instagram stories. So thank you very much, Eric.
Hi, thank you for that. Everybody hanging in there? I know it's hard. I hate speaking at this slot because it's like in the afternoon. You've heard a lot of crazy stuff all day. It's been a lot. I appreciate you coming back to listen. I really do. So yeah, I work at Instagram, and it's really interesting because people make a couple of assumptions when you work at Instagram. And the first one of those assumptions is that I must have a banging Instagram profile. It just means to be the off-the-hook, incredible Instagram profile you've ever seen. That's the first one. The second one is that I must be actually a good photographer in any way, shape, or form. We've been with each other for several hours now, right? So we're all kind of friends. So amongst us friends, I have a little confession to make. If you choose to follow me on Instagram, you're going to be very disappointed. I have a very crappy Instagram profile. I'm sorry to tell you. The one that's even worse is I'm like far-sighted in my right eye and nearsighted in my left eye. I am not a really good photographer at all. And so I work at Instagram, and it's true. And if you need further proof of this, not to beat a dead horse, but this is an actual picture I took a couple weeks in. You'll notice a few things. This was at an event that we were doing in Brazil. This is Vishal. He's our head of product for Instagram. Don't have to tell you it's a little blurry and out of focus, right? The really scary thing is I was on the right side of the room, so kind of over here. This whole side of the room was full, yet I chose to take a picture of the 2 people that he was talking to. And I think the worst thing at all as a new employee of kind of the Facebook family, including Instagram, is I actually posted this, making me probably the least popular person to have ever worked at Instagram in the history of time. So don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it's safe to say that aptitude for photography is not what drives my passion for working at Instagram. As Judy mentioned in the intro, I kind of got my start as a research psychologist, and I studied communication, language and communication. And one of the things that I love about Instagram is this whole session's about marketing in the age of disruption. I think it's safe to say, regardless of how you feel about emojis, this is the visual language of today. I think we can all recognize this as the visual language of today. And Instagram is at the forefront of what visual communication looks like, not just for people, but for brands, for celebrities, and across the board. This is where we're at today. Does this look familiar? Somewhat? It does to me. This is my life every day, emojis. It's interesting. So I'm on the business marketing side of the house, and our job is to think about how we can, with this incredible community we have on Instagram, strengthen the relationships that we have between people that are on the platform and businesses. However, we firmly believe that we can't do that. Now, I will be talking a lot about businesses, but we can't do that without understanding a little something about people. And so that's really where I want to start, because I think we've been talking all day about shifts that have happened over time. But the most important thing that goes through everything we do, from product development to marketing, is this basic notion that consumer value is more important than business value. That's probably not surprising for folks in this room, but on a business team, to say this is pretty starkly interesting, that we believe that the consumer is at the core of what we do. We've seen some shifts over time, most of us in this room. I don't think we have to go over these in vast detail. We've been talking about them all day. But the idea of going from, this, I was going to put my IBM 286 that I had when I was like 12 years old, but I thought that would be too old school, to more of a mobile environment. Not surprising. We've seen this shift happen. It's happening more and more. From just watching television on one screen, which we still do, everybody does, but of course we're doing it everywhere. These things are also involved. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me, and where I want to focus my time, is on this emerging behavioral shift that we're seeing within social media right now. And that's the shift from feed, which this is actually my feed. I'm making myself vulnerable to you. This is actually my feed. To a new kind of media format that some of you may have heard of called Stories, which is full screen, immersive video. Have you heard of Stories? Most people, raise a hand. Most people have heard of Stories. Good. It's a good, savvy crew. That is what I want to kind of spend most of my time talking about, just so we're all on the same page and everybody kind of gets what these are. This is from Thomas on my team, actually. This is not one of my stories. They're too embarrassing to share. This is kind of how they work. Each video that's created lasts about 24 hours, exactly 24 hours. Each chapter lasts for 24 hours. This is ephemeral media that disappears over time, right? The way that it happens is people that follow you, it reaches you organically within your story's environment up on the screen, and then you can tap to go left or right through it. So this is basically how it works. If you haven't played with it, you should play with it. It's super fun. I guarantee you. Stories are absolutely on fire. We launched this, Instagram launched this in October of 2016, rapidly had 100 million people using it. The last public stat that we released in November was already at 300 million daily active accounts using this, which is just staggering amount of growth for a new emerging media format. And you know that the second you put something up on a slide like this, those numbers are outdated because they're back from November. So this is on fire. I think that there's often a lot of skeptics in the crowd that say, okay, this is a new emerging media format. How long is it going to be around? I wish I could share with you the internal numbers that we have, but I'm telling you, stories are going to be a fairly significant % of monetizable time by 2020. And by monetizable time, I'm really talking double digits in the amount of time that people are going to be consuming full-screen, immersive, ephemeral media that goes away very quickly, which should feel empowering to this room, not scary. I don't know how many folks in the crowd have teenagers. Maybe a few. If they've heard about Instagram stories, they might have said, well, isn't that the same thing as Snapchat? Didn't we just do the same thing as Snapchat did? I would like to address that before kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what stories are and how to use them, a little bit of an insight of how we develop them from a product perspective. It's interesting because, especially for this group, usually when I talk about this, I'm not in an academic environment, but we actually have this man, who hopefully some of you recognize as Professor Kahneman, who actually is I won't say to blame, but some of the thinking behind it is the reason why we developed stories to begin with. Maybe some of you have read this book like I did back in 2011, came out, great book. I think the last speaker actually mentioned System 2 thinking. That was one of the core kind of threads through this book, was this very kind of simple idea at the base stage that we've got two different ways of kind of processing information, which he called System 1, System 2. This is the fast, instinctive, automatic kind of processing. System 2 is the more slow, deliberate, or conscious kind of processing. The way that I explain this to much less savvy crowds, to be very honest, is so if you're kind of been driving for a long time and you're old and decrepit and you've been driving for a while, you're relying on that System 1 kind of thinking, super automatic. But remember when you were just first getting behind that wheel, super scary, you didn't know what you were doing, that's the more of that System 2 kind of thinking. Again, I think just a super way of explaining it. Okay, so you're like, what the heck does this actually have to do with stories? In order to kind of explain that, just going to share a super brief, just my anecdotal history and evolution of Instagram over time. This will be interesting for those of you who have been with the platform since it launched. If you remember back, way back when to not that long ago, people would put anything they wanted on Instagram. It was a free-for-all. People would put up, everyday moments, all kinds of stuff, and it was really a place to put anything that you wanted on the platform. Time passed a little bit, and it quickly became this place where it was known for you only put the cream of the cream, the most beautiful, curated stuff that you possibly could, because you'd be embarrassed to show anything else on it. And it felt like, okay, this was meaningful, but is it a little too deliberate? Is it a little too much system too? And in fact, we started to take our cue for what the actual Instagram community was doing, which is really interesting. Again, for those of you who are teenagers, they might have created Finsta's, fake Instagram account, or Binsta's, best friend Instagram accounts. And the idea is they'd put up their everyday moments and then delete them later so that they could put up their really nice stuff. And so people were organically using the platform in a really interesting way. And so we said, okay, there's these two different kinds of processing going on. Wouldn't it be interesting if we were able to marry these and have kind of the feed being more of that, deliberate kind of stuff, and system 1 thinking, and system 2 thinking really being more of that stories, which is a little bit more emotional. And that's really where the kind of story stuff comes from, is it came from a consumer-driven need of what we were seeing on the platform. It wouldn't be surprising to hear Instagram stories are quite different from other social media formats. 40% of Instagram stories are video. So you don't have to do video in stories. You can do micro clips or photographs within it, but 40% are video. Unlike feed environments where you're scrolling really quickly through the feed, sound isn't often on. 60% of story video posts are sound on. And the one that I think is maybe most interesting from a business perspective is that 1 out of 3 stories gets a direct message response. And I think about what the implications could be for customer service when it comes to this, from a business posting a story and then having an immediate response back from a customer, knowing that they're going to get a response because 1 in 3 stories do. So it's interesting to see what's going on with behavior. We've also seen, we've done some third-party research looking at kind of associations that people have with stories versus feed. And we've seen that stories is very much about kind of feelings of inspiration and excitement, whereas the feed is more about calm and relaxation. So again, 2 kind of different mind states that people are approaching these different social media formats from, which has been interesting to find. I think one of the tenets of what I'm trying to do on a daily basis is to think about how to get businesses to use Instagram to reach their customers, which is difficult, again, if you're thinking about media formats that are super fast, super quick over time. It's been interesting because we've seen this huge consumer shift to stories, but businesses are not quite there yet. We haven't seen that same kind of adoption. So the chart for consumers is going like this. For business, it's remaining relatively flat. And I think that this has been a little bit perplexing and offers an opportunity. The reason that I think it's so perplexing is that Instagram is one of those places where people actually want to engage with businesses. And I'm shocked every time I see these numbers. So there's 800 million monthly accounts on Instagram right now. That's a lot of people. 80% of those accounts follow a business just organically because they're interested in the content that businesses have to show on Instagram. And 1/3 of the most viewed stories are from businesses themselves, meaning that when a business is able to make good content, people will watch it, people will follow it. What's really staggering to me is that on Instagram, the environment's really crowded because businesses are positioned among the best, most interesting, most compelling visual content on social media today. Only the most interesting, compelling stuff is the stuff that rises to the top. And it doesn't matter if that's from Nike or from Beyonce. If it's good, it will rise to the top. And it doesn't matter who you are to do it. And that is something that's been a surprising learning for us because some of the principles that I'm going to show about what we've learned work whether you're a regular person or whether you're the biggest brand in the world. So the question that I get all the time is, how the heck do we actually know what works? This is a new emerging format. How do we know where we're supposed to focus or what we're supposed to do? And where we often start is to say, we've kind of developed just a very brief model of saying, in order to think about the mobile mindset overall, we think of sort of this model that we very simply called 70, 20, 10. And this is rough estimates, but we've learned that about 70% of the time, feels like maybe more like 90% of the time in New York City, people are on the go. So you've got to use their time really, really wisely, right? People are on the move all the time, especially young people. About 20% of the time, people are leaning in, meaning that they actually are looking to have some kind of experience on a mobile device, meaning that if you do something interactive as a brand, it can actually work. And I think we've seen some great examples of that today. And then about 10% of the time, we know that people are leaning back, meaning that they're in a more passive mind state when they're consuming social media. And so there's an opportunity to kind of surprise and delight them with interesting things. So again, this is sort of an overall mobile mindset of just how to think about what it means and where people's mind states are when you're trying to reach them in a mobile state. I have some actual creative tips that I'd love to share with you guys. I do feel like it's important to call out some caveats. First caveat, we're still very much learning. This is brand new. We're talking about just over a year old. The learnings are just coming out about sort of what works and what doesn't. What I believe, though, is that what works, works. Whether it's for you as an individual, whether it's for you as an influencer, or whether it's for a brand. And then the third one is that this is not rocket science. I'm sorry. This is absolutely not rocket science. So if some of this seems like, well, these are just principles that work across advertising overall, that should be comforting because we're talking about an entirely different format. OK, first one. Time is a creative tool. What we've learned is that people love to tap and to skip super fast, right? There's ways to think about using that to your advantage by getting super creative with the timing. So I'm going to show you an example from Lowe's Home Improvement, of all people, who what they did is upload little still frames as micro clips that actually allowed the people to do the skipping for them. It was really easy to do. When I show this, watch the little marker that's going to come up at the top. Remember, these go fast. So see that little blue marker? See, time, creative tool. Pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Anyone can do this, very easy. First one. Second one, from the dawn of time, stories love chapters. What that means in the visual medium can mean lots of things, but in this case, it means using multiple scenes in an interesting way. Variety is the spice of life. I made this number up. I think you have longer than 2.8 seconds, but it sounded like good to say we've got about 2.8 seconds to make an impact. I think that could be super scary if you're like, well, that's not enough time to break through. But I think the possibilities are really endless. This is an example from Adidas. They use what we call a carousel unit. So you'll see 3 different media cards, but a super smart way of using Instagram in a way that we haven't seen and wasn't available really before the stories environment. Moves so fast, right? It's just like you can't even blink. But again, stories love chapters. Multiple scenes work really well. Third one, this isn't surprising. Sound adds relevance. 60% of video stories are viewed with the sound on. From the dawn of time in advertising, music creates some kind of mood or a tone. And we've actually shown that you can drive significantly higher relevance with the stories format by using sound in a creative way. It's easy to do this as an individual. It's even easier to do this as a brand. And you can just see one very clear example of this.
The Great.
If you watch it with the sound off, significantly less interesting. It's much better with the sound on. It's the third one, sound adds relevance. Fourth one, bookend your story every time. People are always surprising when we're talking about things that are like at most 6 to 10 seconds at length. People actually do watch to the end because it's not that much time. People have said our attention's shorter than a goldfish. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think it's true. But you have to think about how people are going to remember you. So we always think of, don't miss an opportunity to tell somebody who you are, do a bunch of cool stuff, and then tell them who you are again. And again, this is a particularly good example because it also uses sound. Really like this one. So fast, but at least you start knowing who they are, you end knowing who they are. Super clear, bookended. Last creative tip, play even more. Again, we're learning a lot about this. As I think you've seen through all of these very quick examples and lots of emojis, this is the language of today. It's impossibly fast, split screens, emojis. There is not a single recipe for what works. We have not learned that there's a silver bullet for this. But I do think all these rules are made to be broken. And we're learning what's going to be working. What's true right now is not going to be true tomorrow. Earlier today, I asked a question about Listerine. I think I was primed to ask a question about Listerine. Because right now, we're seeing mouthwash break boundaries, very simply. Kind of mesmerizing, right? It works pretty well. So again, if you're looking to make compelling content, you're a brand, you're a person, time is a creative tool. Chapters love stories. Sound adds relevance. Bookend your story. Play even more. Before I sort of wrap things up, I want to just test your savviness. Okay, so I need you guys to shout it out. We're in the afternoon. Who knows who this is? Hey, dang, it's a nice savvy crowd. I love it. For those of you who don't know this, this is a shtick. He bounces salt off of his elbow. He's a restaurateur, owns a chain of steakhouses. This is Salt Bay. Goes by Salt Bay. Look him up. Phenomenon. 12.7 million followers on Instagram. Okay, 12.7 million followers. He recently opened up one of the chains of a steakhouse in New York. I have not been. I've heard the steak is just mediocre. So I don't know. I can't vouch for it at all. And if you're wondering, like, is that a lot of followers on Instagram? It's a lot of followers on Instagram. One of the top ones is Selena Gomez. She has 130 million followers, but that's Selena Gomez. So we're talking about a guy that bounces salt off of his elbow. These are the celebrities of today. I think, I can't remember her name from Keds was here because I think she would totally know what I'm talking about. The reason that I'm bringing this up and the reason that I wanted to end with this and open it up for questions is that I think that if Salt Bay can do it, anyone can. Anyone can do this, okay? So this is not rocket science. You can do this too. That's what is tapping into Instagram's cultural force. We're at the dawn of stories. We're at the very early days, super excited about it. And that's what I've got for you today. Thank you guys so much for your time.